Lace up those cleats, my friends. In this week's episode of Assassination Classroom, Class 3E is going to have a big sports tournament with the baseball club. That's right, Koro-sensei's underdog assassins are literally going to be playing a baseball game in this week's episode, and you just know that Sugino is going to be one of the main characters this week. What I really loved about this one is just how much it paid homage to arguably the greatest sport ever created. Am I right? This week's episode also sees the return of the notorious principal of their school, Asano, and it makes for a great battle with Koro-sensei. I especially love how Koro-sensei got his entire class pumped up for the tournament by training them on an individual basis, as well as basically just beating it into their brains. And he did this by literally dressing up as a baseball for most of the episode. And right as the game is about to begin, you know shit's about to get real, because Koro-sensei says it himself. He's gonna give him a taste of baseball from hell, infused with murderous intent and tentacles. The episode starts out very simple at first, with Class 3E surprising everybody that they're pretty good at baseball. That's suddenly when Principal Asano decides to come in and mix things up. One of my favorite things about this week's episode is that Koro-sensei himself actually looked like a baseball. What I also really loved about that is that he was hanging out in the outfield the entire time, coaching his team by constantly popping his head up and down. 1, 2, 3. I especially love the one scene when he had no idea what to do, and he basically just completely covered his face in shame. At the beginning of the game, Class 3E looks like they're actually winning. It looks like they're actually going to win this thing pretty easily. That's when freaking Asano just shows up out of nowhere and sort of takes over the team and starts mixing up the rules in what is arguably some of the most underhanded baseball that I think I have ever seen. But then again, this is an anime about a weird freaky octopus monster that's going to destroy the world, trying to get people trying to kill him at the same time, so they can get away with this type of stuff. So Asano actually has his team move in close into the infield because apparently the Assassination Classroom is just doing bunts. That is until a little later into the match when frickin' Sugino goes up to bat and starts sending those things right into the dead center of right field. But then we also get to see why Asano is so freaking evil and why he's the perfect antithesis to Koro-sensei, and that's because he is an evil, manipulative bastard who literally, and I mean literally, hypnotizes his students into doing his bidding. Asano himself is an awesome villain. He's so high on himself, and he's got the most major ego I think I've ever seen. I especially love that one line where he's like, basically, you're unilaterally gaining ascendancy. What a freaking prick! The end of this week's episode does have a nice twist, and of course, it's Karma Akabane who makes it all badass. At the very end of the game, they decide they're going to copy exactly what they're doing, except that they're going to move in right next to the batter so that when they have no choice but to swing the bat, they're inadvertently going to hit them. But because the students from Class 3E are assassins, they're able to dodge that shit and basically just psych out their opponents. It might end with what might be the most anticlimactic triple play of all time, but Class 3E wins. Everybody is shocked and floored, ending this week's episode, which just made you feel good. So what's the rundown? On this week's episode of Assassination Classroom, I really loved this episode a lot. It was a really simple episode too. It was basically just a big baseball game, but what I really loved most about it is it really showed how different Koro-sensei and Asano were. This was basically their next big challenge. I especially love that Koro-sensei said, basically, they're on even terms now. In the midterms, Asano won. This time, Koro-sensei won. At the final exams, that's where they'll have their final battle of sorts. Otherwise, my favorite thing about this week's episode was easily the imagery. I loved it, especially Koro-sensei himself. I love how whenever he gets involved into something, he just goes full in. Like, he's all about baseball, with the gloves, the freaking head transforming into a baseball. I just love that whole aesthetic. It's also good to see that not all of the people at their school are complete and total douchebags. It seems like Sugino actually had a nice friendly rivalry with all of the people who were in the baseball club. Of course, Shindo, the actual big guy, the big pitcher, he seemed like he was a little high on himself, but mostly a lot of that I think had to do with Asano basically getting into his head and messing with his mind a little bit. That was very nice this week. I especially loved the imagery, how they displayed how evil he was when he came out. His eyes were glowing. It looked really awesome. And that final scene where they decided to get right next to the batter was really ballsy and very intense. Basically, they're letting everybody know that we're not going to get pushed around anymore. And there was that one scene where Karma actually talked back to everybody, and Koro-sensei was completely okay with that. that. He wants them to rebel a little bit, and I think that's pretty awesome. The other big thing to note about this week's episode is that there's actually a brand new intro, and I'm going to be perfectly blunt. I don't like it as much as the first. The song is still very upbeat, it gets you excited for the episode. The imagery is mostly the same. Basically, it's just all the students jumping up, going through the whole roll call. That's pretty much it, intercut with some scenes from some of the previous episodes. I frankly just liked the first intro just a little bit more. Maybe it was just the fact that they went through the roll call a little bit slower. Maybe I liked the song a little bit more. I don't know. All I know is the second intro is okay, but it didn't wow me as much as the first, but it'll still get you excited for the episode. So believe it or not, this was the second baseball episode of the series, but honestly, I thought it was really good. I'm really glad that we got to see a lot of the different students working together, and even though we didn't get to see much of the female students, they did have one funny scene that involved a lot of fan service and some side boobs, so I'm sure you guys are going to like that. Otherwise, this week's episode was just as much a battle between the students as it was a battle between Koro-sensei and Asano, just in the form of a baseball game, and I thought that was really clever. The animation was really good, it was just a lot of high energy, the new intro is pretty okay. This was, all in all, a really great episode, and just the fact that we've been on break for a couple weeks, I was really looking forward to this one, and I really liked it. So I'm going to give this week's episode of Assassination Classroom a 5 out of 5. One of my favorite episodes of the entire series, and if you consider yourself a sports fan, you should definitely check it out. And if you're a fan of Assassination Classroom, whether it be the anime or the manga, check this one out. You might see something you like. Thank you guys for watching my review. Before you guys leave, make sure to tell me what you thought about this week's episode of Assassination Classroom. Did you have a favorite moment from this week's episode? A favorite character that showed up? What do you want to see from the rest of Assassination Classroom? Remember guys, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.